Greek mythology retellings are everywhere, and they just keep coming. Talented authors, mostly women, taking aspects of Greek mythology and retelling them, respinning them, oftentimes with a feminist twist and delivering something wonderfully unique, fresh, something for the modern day, for the modern world, but that is usually still respectful of and kind of in awe of its origins. Respecting lineage, respecting the traditions of storytelling, while making sure to create something new and fascinating and rich and interesting as a 21st century novel. We've had so many of these, and I'm not sick of them. Are you? So here are 3 that I recently read and I really want to talk about. To be fair to you, I'm going to start with the one that I enjoyed the most, and then work my way down to the one I enjoyed the least. But the one I enjoyed the least, I do have a lot to say about because I think it's pretty interesting. First up is Atalanta by Jennifer Saint. Alongside Natalie Haynes, Jennifer Saint has quickly become my favourite reteller of Greek mythology. All 3 of her novels so far have been knockout hits for me. When I think of great, feminist, action-packed, smart, beautiful Greek mythology retellings, I now think of Natalie Haynes and Jennifer Saint. And Atalanta might be her best work yet. It wasn't long ago I read her second novel, Electra, and really loved it and talked about it on this channel, but Atalanta's a step up from this. Jennifer Saint just keeps outdoing herself. So I did a bit of research before I dug into this, and it seems like the titular Atalanta has 2 Greek myths associated with her. Depending on who's telling the story, Atalanta is 2 people. She was either the only female Argonaut, or she was Greece's fastest runner. And in both of these myths, she's the person who manages to slay the Caledonian boar. At least that's how my research presented it. In this book, you get all of that. Atalanta was abandoned as a baby on a hillside in a forest by a father who didn't want a daughter. She's left there for the wolves to just eat her, but she's saved by a bear. This bear keeps her alive and raises her for a short time in amongst its bear cubs, and then eventually she's sort of taken away and taken in and properly raised by one of my personal favourite goddesses, Artemis. Goddess of the hunt. Artemis abandoned Olympus. She didn't like any of that godly stuff, and so she spent most of her time living in a forest that she kind of controlled, going out and hunting the creatures of that forest and living amongst nymphs. And Atalanta is welcomed into their magical place, and she's raised there as the only mortal. When she gets to a certain age, she is warned by Artemis that she must never marry. At this point, Atalanta hasn't even seen another human, let alone a man, but she's told by Artemis that she mustn't marry. But she must go out on her own. She sets out on a journey. She arrives in a city, she meets a really nice guy who says that he is an Argonaut. He and a crew of 50 men are going to set sail on a ship called the Argo, led by a man called Jason. And this crew of 50 men is the greatest collection of heroes that Greece has ever seen. And Jason is going to lead them on a vast journey that will eventually lead to the Golden Fleece, a treasure that he wants to possess. And Jason has been sent out on this journey by Hera, queen of the gods, wife of Zeus. She has blessed him in his journey, and amongst these Argonauts you have Heracles, who's currently doing his labors, but takes a little bit of time to join the crew, and the musician Orpheus. Orpheus honestly doesn't do a whole lot in this book, he's just kind of there, but it's cool to see him. Orpheus, the sad emo musician who goes to hell to retrieve his wife Eurydice. Like, that's the story you think of when you think of Orpheus, but he's on the Argo, and he plays music to calm everyone down. So most of this story is an adventure, and what I really liked about Atalanta is that modern day fantasy books owe everything to mythology. Without Arthurian legend, without Greek mythology and Norse mythology, we wouldn't have fantasy. J.R.R. Tolkien, who created the fantasy genre, was trying to create his own mythology, his own world. And now it feels like we've kind of come full circle, where all of these Greek mythology retellings are fantasy books. Mythology-inspired fantasy, and fantasy has kind of inspired these, and I would say Atalanta is the most fantasy-feeling Greek mythology retelling I've read. A lot of them are set in a singular place, and they retread a lot of things that we've seen before, and they feature characters we've seen before, but the great thing about Jennifer Saint is that she so often takes characters that we know next to nothing about. I knew nothing about Electra, I knew nothing about Ariadne, and I knew nothing at all about Atalanta. And so I got to go on a journey with her. I knew the story of Jason and the Argonauts and the Golden Fleece, but only vaguely. And here I got to re-experience that story from the perspective of a woman. A fast, stealthy, and talented archer who puts her skills to use on the Argo. And as the journey goes on, they stop on different islands and they meet people and they see things and stuff happens. There are consistent events. This is a very, very fast novel. It moves at a breakneck pace. So much happens all the time. You see so much, you experience so much. There is combat, there is adventure, there is tragedy, there is loss, there are twists and turns. This is a true adventure fantasy story. But at no point does it sacrifice any emotional depth or breadth to get there. Atalanta is very much a lovable, interesting and dynamic protagonist, and the people that she meets are equally so. And I was really impressed by the fact that Jennifer Saint manages to cram so much adventure into this novel, which is a very ordinary length. And at no point does she skimp on our emotional connection to the protagonist and the characters around her. So much happens here, and you feel so much as the journey goes on. Atalanta as a character is fantastic. She's wonderfully naive because she doesn't know anything about the world of mortal men. She doesn't understand the way that men have this ego, this arrogance, this hubris, that so much of what they do is led by shame and regret, the fear of failure. Pride is such an important element to manhood, especially at this time, and a lot of that kind of confuses Atalanta, but she also can't deny that she has a competitive spirit of her own. She has a lot to prove. Sometimes she doesn't feel the need to prove anything because she doesn't understand why she should or why she needs to. Other times she does. Depending on what she's challenged to do, she feels a sense of pride because she's proud of her ability to hunt or to run very quickly, and so those things will prick at her ego, but other things won't. And I thought that that was really dynamic, and it showed that Saint has paid attention to the character and spent a lot of time nurturing her, getting to know her, bond with her, and we really feel that through the narrative. She's a wonderfully fun and flawed and interesting character that we watch grow over the course of several months. The men sometimes feel like caricatures, as they so often do, especially the heroes and male gods of Greek mythology. Their hubris, their arrogance, their ego is fun to watch, and it's no different here in this novel. I'm so impressed by Atalanta. I think this is a fantastic book. It's now my favourite Jennifer Saint book, and given that she, alongside Natalie Haynes, is my favourite Greek mythology retelling person, that really says a lot. This is now one of my favourite Greek mythology retellings. Well done to her. She keeps outshining herself. Then we have Ithaca by Claire North. Claire North is relatively well known for writing science fiction books, and recently she turned her hand to Greek mythology, and she proved that she can do it really, really well. Like so many Greek mythology retellings, Claire North has chosen to hone in on a specific time, a specific place, and a specific character. And this character for her is Penelope, wife of Odysseus. Now I should state up front that I've never read the Penelopiad, which is Margaret Atwood's retelling of Penelope's story, I believe. I haven't read it, I basically just know the name, so if you've read it, tell me about it. Odysseus was the king of Ithaca, and he went off to Troy to fight in the Trojan War alongside Agamemnon, Achilles, and many other established heroes and characters of Greek mythology. And famously, he was gone for a long time, the length of an Odyssey. 18 years go by, and during that time, Penelope is left to rule over Ithaca. And famously, the thing that we all know about her is that she sat and she weaved a shroud. And as she did this, suitors kept knocking at her door over and over again, one after the other, asking for her hand in marriage. They would claim it's because she's beautiful, they would admit that they want to rule Ithaca, they want to replace Odysseus, they want power, they want fame, and there's a lot of them, and she keeps shooing them away. That's the story we all know, and that's pretty much the story we get here, but with a lot more detail, a lot more character, and a lot more fairness owed to Penelope herself. Penelope also has an 18-year-old son, Telemachus. Odysseus never knew him. He was either born just before Odysseus left or after, I'm not sure. And now he's 18 and he never knew his father, but he's an arrogant little shit. He wants to prove himself, he wants to step out from his father's shadow, even though he never knew his dad. And he also believes that Odysseus is not dead, despite the fact that the Trojan War ended like 10 years ago and he just never returned. Agamemnon returned. Achilles died there. Where's Odysseus? Where are the men of Ithaca? Because that's kind of the important thing at the beginning of this novel. Not only is Odysseus not there, but all the men that he took with him are also not here. Which means this is an island of women, who at the time were not fighters, and men who were either under the age of 18 or very, very elderly. All the men in the middle, all the men of fighting age, left. And those men, when they left, would have been between, say, 18 and 40. So now what's left? Who's left to defend Ithaca? So this book frames Penelope as a tactician. She's got to find a way to keep the peace in Ithaca. She's got to defend her throne. She's got to keep her son sane. She's got to decide what to do with all of these suitors and also understand that there is a benefit to marrying someone. She has to wonder what to think about Odysseus and the fact that he's not there and he might not come back and he might be dead, he might not. And in the very opening chapter, pirates and raiders are coming to the shores of Ithaca. Ithaca is under threat. And then I'll also just leave you with a little teaser of what happens a little bit later on. About a quarter or maybe a third of the way through this book, Electra appears on a ship to tell Penelope that Agamemnon is now dead, murdered famously by his wife Clytemnestra. So this is the story of Penelope. It's the story of Ithaca. It's the story of Odysseus's home and the people he left behind, and the events that happened there while he's away. What sets this book apart is the fact that the entire thing is narrated by Hera. She's our narrator, and there is a benefit to that, but also a massive negative. The benefit is that it's quite dynamic. She is floating above all of this, and she gets to inject her own sense of personality. We get to learn about Hera. We see the way that she influences this story in a very godly way, and it's a lot of fun, and I really enjoyed her as a narrator protagonist. The negative is that this keeps Penelope at arm's length, and I kept thinking maybe we should have had Penelope as our narrator. Instead, Penelope is just kept at a distance, and that means that we never get to know her. The cover shows Penelope as someone who is ghostly and hollow and unknowable and distant from us, and a woman that no one ever truly understood. And because of the narration choice, this continues to be true. We still don't really know Penelope because we're busy getting to know the world through Hera's eyes as a very witty and charming and sometimes funny narrator and character in her own right. And I just didn't love that. Hera as a choice of narrator is cool in one way and kind of frustrating in another, and so it left me feeling a little bit divided on the whole thing. But the events of the story, and Penelope herself, it's all very, very good. But the narration is just a thing that pokes at the back of your mind and frustrates you the whole time. Very, very irritating. So Ithaca isn't perfect. It's another Greek mythology retelling that I really, really enjoyed. I just think that the choice of narration kind of holds it back a little bit, and it could have been better if it was slightly reframed. And finally, we have Psyche and Eros by Luna McNamara. This is a curious book that I liked in some ways and disliked in others. And I actually had a chat fairly recently with Erica of Moan Inc. That conversation took place on her channel, and I'll link it in the description. It was a really, really fun chat. Like, we talked for hours upon hours about this book, and so she really had to do a lot of editing to cut that down. But we both had so much to say. Psyche and Eros is really interesting, and where I came down was that this is better served and marketed as a romance novel rather than a Greek mythology retelling, even though it is that. But I would say that generally fans of Greek mythology retellings are people who like genre fiction, who like fantasy, who like adventure, and who already like Greek mythology. This is far more concerned with being a romance novel first and foremost. Psyche is a Greek princess who wishes to kind of buck traditions and be a great warrior. I'm now realizing I've forgotten so much about this book since I read it like a month ago. Wow. I guess that says a lot. What I do remember is that Luna McNamara made Psyche a princess of Mycenae. When I talked to Erica, I think she said that that wasn't true, and she's an expert in classics. So this book takes a lot of liberties. And Psyche early in the book is also taught to fight by Atalanta. Atalanta at this point is a legendary warrior and an Argonaut, and she teaches Psyche how to be a warrior woman. Eros is a god. He was the god of desire. And when the book begins, we see the creation of the world from his perspective, and I found it really, really fun and engaging. We see the Titans and what they did to create the world, and the gods who eventually went to war with the Titans, and the fact that Aphrodite eventually turns Eros into her little pet, a little servant. Aphrodite, for some reason I now can't remember, decides to curse Psyche and sends Eros to do the cursing. And Eros, who is effectively Cupid, takes a bow and arrow, and he must prick Psyche with that arrow. But clumsily, he pricks himself instead and curses himself. And the curse goes that he is now in love with Psyche and will do anything for her. He loves her unconditionally, but she must never lay eyes on him. If she does, they will be ripped apart forever. That's the curse. And so this novel explores their relationship, how the hell they end up together, whether or not she actually falls in love with him, and if so, how does that work? How do they exist together when she can never see him? And it's pretty fun to watch, and actually a lot happens. There is a moment where, for reasons I won't explain, Psyche has to go down into Hades. And instead of Charon, the ferryman who guides people into the underworld, Charon's like taken a day off and is replaced by Medusa. And Medusa teaches Psyche about feminism. And it's really, really weird. She acts as a kind of exposition dump to explain to Psyche how patriarchy is unfair and women deserve better and blah blah blah. It's very, very weird, and it actually happens twice, I think, throughout the book. When I was talking to Erica about this book, when it was actually more fresh on my mind, I talked about the fact that I didn't really like McNamara's exploration of feminism and strength in women. She spends a lot of the novel presenting Psyche as strong from a male perspective, kind of having an idea that strength means this list of specific things, which are strength as defined by men. Physical strength, the ability to hunt or win in a fight or be brave and courageous, and all of these adjectives that we use that are synonymous with strength. And Psyche is kind of living up to all of that, but she doesn't have to. There is strength on a woman's terms. There is feminine strength, feminist strength. And I think defining a female protagonist by a masculine version of strength is doing that character a disservice. It's kind of just feeding into patriarchy and regurgitating patriarchy through the rules of patriarchy. And a woman is just subjecting herself to that, trying to live up to male standards of strength. And that's not fair or necessary. Truth time, I might have waited a little bit too long to talk about this book because I just got through reading Ithaca and Atalanta, and I thought finally I can talk about these books, and I'll talk about this one as well, and that'll be 3, and I can put a 3 in the title of the video. But I've forgotten so much of this book. So please go watch Erica's video, the conversation with me where we talk about this book in lots and lots of detail. Again, it's in the description, go watch that, and you'll get much more insightful analysis of this book from me and Erica in that video, because I don't remember this very well, so I'm gonna stop talking about it now. Ithaca, as I said, a lot of fun, a few downsides, and Atalanta was a perfect adventure story. Now my favourite Jennifer Saint book, and therefore one of my favourite Greek mythology retellings. Absolute 10 out of 10, perfect, wonderful book, even though I don't ever do ratings, you know what I mean. I don't feel well today, at all. I feel horrific, so I hope I've done a half-decent job of talking about these books. Please forgive me for the fact that half of Psyche and Eros has gone out of my head. I'm gonna go eat something and then lie down. I love you. Subscribe for books.